The kill pen was the last place I ever wanted to be, especially on a cold October morning like that. The air cut through my chest every time I breathed in, sharp and bitter, and the sound of frightened horses echoed in a way that settled deep in my bones. I remember thinking I should turn around, get back in my truck, and drive the 3 hours home to my ranch in Wyoming. But my feet kept moving forward, pulled by something I could not name yet. Wyatt Cole walked beside me, his boots crunching on the frozen dirt. He had been my ranch hand for years, and more than that, my closest friend. He had seen animals in bad shape before, but even he looked uneasy. He glanced at me and asked if I was sure about being there. I told him no, and that was the truth. The only reason I had come was my daughter, Ruby. She was 17 and stubborn in the way only a big-hearted kid could be. For months, she had begged me to rescue a horse from a kill pen. She showed me videos and stories every night at the kitchen table until I finally agreed to come and just look. The smell hit us before we reached the auction ring. Fear, sweat, old hay, and cold metal mixed together in a way that made my stomach turn. Horses stood packed in narrow pens, ribs showing, heads hanging low, eyes dull and tired. These were not buyers looking for riding horses or ranch partners. These were kill buyers, men who looked at horses like weight on a scale. I told myself I would not get involved. I told myself I was only there to see what Ruby had been talking about. Then Lot 51 was called. A bay gelding was led into the ring, and the moment I saw him, my breath caught in my throat. He was painfully thin, his ribs clear under a coat matted with dried mud. Burrs clung to his tail, and his mane was tangled and rough. But there was something else there. His neck still carried a proud curve. His head was refined, his build strong even under all that neglect. This was not a horse born to end like this. The bidding started low. Voices called out numbers without emotion. The gelding flinched every time someone shouted, his eyes darting across the crowd as if he was searching for a familiar face that would never appear. I felt a strange pull in my chest, a pressure that made it hard to look away. Someone had loved this horse once, I was sure of it. Without planning to, I heard my own voice call out a bid. Wyatt turned and stared at me like I had lost my mind. The kill buyer shot back a higher number, his eyes hard and annoyed. I clenched my jaw. I had $500 in my pocket, money meant for ranch equipment, not this. But I also knew if I walked away, Ruby would never forgive me, and I would never forgive myself either. I bid again. The moment stretched, heavy and tense. Finally, the other buyer backed off. The auctioneer called it sold for $200. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear Wyatt clap my shoulder and tell me Ruby was going to lose her mind when she saw him. Loading the gelding into our trailer took time. He moved slow and careful, favoring one front leg. I spoke softly to him, telling him he was safe now, though I was not sure he believed me yet. When he looked at me, really looked at me, his eyes were calm and sharp at the same time, intelligent. A horse like that did not end up here by accident. The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept checking the mirrors, making sure he was steady. When we finally pulled into the ranch, Ruby came running out, her face lighting up the moment she saw him. She did not care how skinny he was or how rough he looked. She saw what I saw. Promise. We settled him into our biggest stall, with fresh hay and water. Ruby stood there watching him drink, tears slipping down her cheeks. She asked what his name was, and I told her we would wait until the vet checked him out. Still, my mind kept circling the same questions. Where had he come from? Who had owned him? How did a horse with that kind of presence end up in a kill pen? 2 days later, the vet arrived. He went over the gelding carefully, explaining old injuries and signs of long neglect. Nothing new, nothing that could not heal. Then he brushed dirt away from the horse's left hip and suddenly went quiet. He called me over, his voice low and serious. There, faded but clear, was a brand I had never seen before. In that moment, I knew this rescue was not just a rescue. I had stepped into something far bigger than a single horse, and my whole world was about to change. I stood in that stall longer than I meant to, staring at the faded brand like it might disappear if I blinked. A simple shape, worn down by time and hardship, yet it carried weight. The vet explained what it meant, how rare it was, how horses from that ranch were known across the country. I listened, but my mind felt far away. All I could think was that this horse had a past none of us understood yet. After the vet left, I walked back to the house and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The sun had barely come up, and the light coming through the window felt thin and pale. Ruby paced behind me, unable to stay still. Wyatt leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching the screen with the same quiet focus he brought to everything. I typed the ranch name into the search bar and hit enter. What came up did not look real. Wide green pastures, clean white fences, shiny barns that looked more like showplaces than working ranches. Photos of powerful horses standing proud, ribbons hanging from their bridles, trophies lined up on shelves. This was a world far away from kill pens and rusted gates. Then I saw him. My chest tightened as the image loaded. A bay gelding stood in a show pen, coat gleaming, muscles strong and full, head held high with quiet confidence. The shape of his neck, the look in his eyes, the stance of his legs, there was no doubt. It was the same horse standing in my barn, just stripped of everything he had once been. Wyatt spoke first, his voice low. "That is him." The caption under the photo made my stomach drop. A name I had not known until that moment. A title, a price that felt unreal. This horse had not just been loved, he had been celebrated, trained, shown, trusted by someone young enough to build dreams around him. Ruby covered her mouth with her hands. "Dad, that is our horse." I felt something heavy settle in my chest. This was not just about money or value. This horse had been someone's whole world once. I whispered the question out loud, even though none of us had an answer. How did he end up in a kill pen? There was only one thing left to do. I found the phone number on the ranch website and dialed it before I could talk myself out of it. A woman answered, polite and calm. I explained who I was and where I lived, then told her about the horse. There was a pause, then she put me on hold. When the call came back, a man's voice filled the line. Strong, controlled, but shaken underneath. He asked me to repeat what I had said. When I mentioned the kill pen, I heard his breath catch. "That horse had been missing for a year and a half," he said. "Stolen from a barn in Colorado. They had searched everywhere. Flyers, reports, rewards, nothing." My hand tightened around the phone. He told me the horse belonged to a teenage girl, a youth rider. Losing him had crushed her. She had stopped competing, stopped smiling from what he said. I looked out the window toward the barn, where the gelding stood quietly eating hay, unaware of the storm of emotions tied to his existence. I told the man I had bought the horse for $200. The line went quiet for a moment. Then he thanked me. Not in a polite way, in a way that sounded like relief breaking through exhaustion. He gave me another number and told me who it belonged to. That night, I sat alone on the porch with my phone in my hand. The stars were sharp and bright above the ranch, the kind of sky that usually brought me peace, but my thoughts were tangled. How do you call a family and tell them the thing they lost and mourned might still be alive? When I finally dialed, a woman answered. Her voice changed the moment I explained why I was calling. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then the phone moved and a man spoke next. I told him everything, where I found the horse, his condition, what the vet said. There was crying in the background, quiet at first, then harder to hide. The man told me it was his daughter. She had not been the same since the horse was taken. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all press down on me. I told the man the horse would come home, that I would care for him until he was strong enough, that money did not matter. There was a silence on the line that felt full, not empty, grateful. He asked for a picture, just one, so his daughter could see that hope was real. I walked back to the barn, the smell of hay and wood wrapping around me like something solid. Ruby sat outside the stall, talking softly to the horse. He lifted his head when I stepped in, ears forward, calm and curious. I raised my phone and took a photo. A few minutes later, my screen lit up with a video call. A teenage girl appeared, her face pale, eyes red, hands shaking as she held the phone. The moment she saw the horse behind me, she broke down. She whispered his name like it was a prayer. I told her he was safe. She cried harder. As I stood there in that quiet barn, watching a girl on a screen reunite with a horse she thought was gone forever, I realized this rescue was no longer just mine. It belonged to everyone's life this horse had touched, and the story was far from over. After that night, everything changed in ways I never expected. The calls started coming every day, sometimes more than once. The girl wanted to see him, to make sure he was real, to hear about what he ate, how he moved, whether he still lifted his head the way he used to. I understood that need more than I could explain. Losing him had frozen a part of her life, and seeing him again, even through a screen, was slowly thawing it. I began sending short videos every morning. I showed her how he nickered softly when he saw the feed bucket, how he stood patiently while I brushed the dirt from his coat. She watched every detail closely, smiling through tears. Ruby joined in too, talking to her like they had known each other forever. Two girls, miles apart, connected by one horse who had somehow held them both together. Week by week, the gelding changed. His ribs faded under new weight. His coat grew smooth and shiny again. The farrier fixed his hooves, and the vet confirmed the old injury in his leg was healing well. His eyes were the biggest change. The fear slowly drained away, replaced by curiosity and trust. Sometimes I would catch him standing at the stall door, ears forward, as if he was waiting for someone specific. But one question kept me awake at night. How did a champion horse disappear and end up broken down in a kill pen? With help from the ranch that bred him, I reached out to law enforcement in Colorado. The officer who handled the case spoke calmly, but her words cut deep. The horse had been passed from hand to hand, sold again and again across several states. Each time he lost a little more care, a little more value, until no one remembered what he had once been. Hearing it made me feel sick, a living creature reduced to paperwork and profit. Knowing the truth did not fix the past, but it gave the story shape, and it made what came next feel even heavier. 6 weeks passed faster than I expected. One morning, the vet smiled and said the words I knew were coming. He was ready to travel, strong enough, healthy enough, ready to go home. That night, Ruby barely touched her dinner. She pushed her food around her plate, her eyes distant. When I asked if she was all right, she finally whispered that she was going to miss him. Not just him, but the idea that there were so many others we could not save. I took her hand and told her the truth. We saved one, and sometimes one life is enough to change everything. The Baxters arrived the morning after Christmas. The air was cold and clear, the sky bright with winter light. Their truck rolled into the driveway with a trailer behind it, and suddenly the ranch felt smaller, like the moment before a storm breaks. The father stepped out first, his face tired but full of gratitude. The mother followed, quiet and watchful. Then the girl climbed down slowly, as if she was afraid to rush and wake herself from a dream. She stood still, staring toward the barn. I told her he was inside. Ruby walked with her, keeping close, letting her set the pace. Her steps started slow, then faster, pulled forward by hope she could not hold back anymore. Before I could follow, the father stopped me and pressed an envelope into my hand. I opened it and felt my breath leave me. I tried to give it back, but his wife gently pushed my hand down. She told me to use it to save more horses, that it was the only way they could make sense of what we had given them. Then a sound cut through the cold air. A sharp, clear whinny echoed from the barn, followed by a cry filled with laughter and tears all at once. We hurried inside. The horse stood at the stall door, ears forward, alive with recognition. The girl had her arms around his neck, her face buried in his mane. He nuzzled her hair, making a deep, soft sound that felt like relief. She whispered that he remembered her. We gave them time, as much as they needed. When it was finally time to load him, he followed her without hesitation, stopping when she stopped, turning when she turned. Trust like that does not disappear, no matter how much time passes. Before he stepped into the trailer, she hugged Ruby and promised to stay in touch. Pictures every day. She meant it. The father shook my hand and told me to call if I ever needed anything, that he would help however he could. As the trailer pulled away, the horse looked back once at the barn that had healed him. Then he turned toward the girl beside him and rested his head near her shoulder. He was going home. I stood there in the quiet after they left, the dust settling around us. The barn felt empty in a way I was not ready for. Ruby wiped her eyes and asked a question I had been expecting. Could we rescue another one? I looked at the empty stall, at the space where a life had been saved, and nodded. I think we can. The barn did not stay empty for long. A few weeks after the trailer disappeared down the road, I found myself standing in that same stall, staring at the scuffed boards and the nameplate I had never taken down. It reminded me how one choice, made on a cold October morning, had shifted everything on this ranch. Ruby felt it too. She spent more time in the barn than ever, cleaning stalls that did not yet have horses, preparing space for lives we had not met. We started small, one horse, then two. Each came from a different place, each carrying their own quiet pain. Some were thin and scared, like the first one. Others were shut down, eyes empty from too many bad hands. We worked slowly, learning each story one day at a time. Word spread faster than I expected. People called. Some asked for help. Others asked how they could help us. Ruby shared the journey online, posting photos and short updates. She told the story honestly, without drama, just truth. Somehow it reached people. Messages came in from across the country. Donations followed. Hay, blankets, medicine. Even Wyatt stepped fully into the work, turning the ranch into something more than it had ever been. Months passed, and the rescue barns filled with life. Some horses healed and went to new homes. Others stayed, needing more time or choosing us as their safe place. Every stall held a story, and every story mattered. One afternoon, Ruby ran toward me, her phone in her hand, her face glowing. She showed me a photo of a familiar bay horse standing in a show ring, his coat shining under the sun. Beside him stood a young girl, smiling in a way that told me her heart was whole again. They had won their class. The caption talked about second chances and gratitude. I stood there longer than I needed to, letting the image sink in. Not long after, my phone rang. A familiar voice was on the other end. Another horse, another kill pen, another chance. I looked around the barn at the horses chewing hay, the empty stalls waiting, the place that had grown from one simple rescue. I said yes without hesitation. That evening, I walked through the barn alone. I stopped at the stall where it all began and rested my hand on the door. I thought about how close we had come to losing something priceless without ever knowing it existed. How sometimes the smallest decisions carry the biggest weight. It still amazes me that it all started with $200. But what we gained was worth far more than money. We gained purpose. We gained a future built on compassion and second chances. And every time a frightened horse steps off a trailer and into our care, I am reminded that saving one life can open the door to saving many more. Sometimes, a second chance looks like a skinny horse in a kill pen. And sometimes, saying yes changes everything.